Every empire that has ever fallen likes to blame the enemy at the gate. Rome did too, but if you trace its full story from the very beginning to the very end, a much stranger pattern emerges. One that Roman historians rarely say out loud. The people who did the most damage to Rome were never really outsiders. They were the ones already standing closest to power. It starts before Rome even exists, in a smaller city called Alba Longa, where a king is pushed off his throne by his own younger brother. To make sure no rival heir can ever challenge him, the usurper has the king's children removed and forces the one surviving daughter into a life that guarantees she can never produce an heir of her own. It should have worked. Except she gives birth anyway, to twin boys, and the boy who calls himself their father is the god of war himself. At least according to the story the family told afterward. Whether or not you believe that part, what happens next is where the real history begins. The twins are cast out to die, survive against every likelihood, and grow up to reclaim their family's throne by force, restoring their grandfather as ruler. And then, instead of settling down, the two brothers decide to build a city of their own. This is where the founding myth of the most powerful empire in ancient history turns into a story about two brothers who could not agree on where to build a wall, and it ends with one of them gone, and the other standing alone as Rome's first king. From day one, the city that would rule the Mediterranean was founded on a family eliminating its own competition. That detail matters more than it sounds, because it becomes the exact pattern Rome keeps repeating for the next 1,000 years. The first king builds an army out of refugees and outcasts. He solves Rome's shortage of women by inviting a neighboring people to a festival and, mid-celebration, taking their daughters by force, an act that nearly destroys the fragile young city before the two peoples merge into one. 6 more kings follow. Some build, some destroy, several are removed violently by their own political rivals, and the very last one is so widely hated that the people of Rome expel him themselves and vow never again to let a single man hold that much power unchecked. So they build a republic instead. 2 co-rulers, checks on power, a system designed specifically to prevent any one person from becoming what that 7th king had become. For nearly 500 years, that system mostly holds. Rome expands relentlessly, absorbs its neighbors, survives a humiliating occupation by invaders from Gaul that leaves the city looted and burned, and comes back from it more militarized than ever. It fights a trilogy of wars against its greatest rival across the sea, Carthage, a power with wealth, a navy, and war elephants that very nearly break Rome for good under the general Hannibal. Rome wins anyway, and afterward, so thoroughly removes Carthage from the map that no civilization ever poses that kind of threat to it again. And then Rome turns its full weight toward the one region that had humiliated it centuries earlier, Gaul, the home of the very people who once burned the city to the ground. The man who finishes that campaign is Julius Caesar, and what he does over the following years makes him arguably the most powerful individual Rome has ever produced. He doesn't just win battles. He lowers taxes, feeds the poor, rebuilds half the city, and fixes the calendar so thoroughly that the system he introduced is still, in modified form, the one the world uses today. By almost every measure, the ordinary Roman citizen loves him. The Senate does not. And here is the detail that gets lost in most retellings. The men who orchestrate Caesar's removal genuinely believe they are saving the Republic from becoming exactly what it fought so hard to prevent 5 centuries earlier. A kingdom under one man. They act in a public meeting, surrounded by people who are supposed to be his peers. And the plan backfires almost instantly because the ordinary people of Rome never wanted him gone. Within years, his adopted heir consolidates total control anyway, and the republic the conspirators thought they were protecting ceases to exist for good. The empire is born from the very act meant to stop one. That first emperor understands something his predecessors never grasped. The Republic didn't collapse because of bad laws. It collapsed because loyalty inside Rome kept flowing toward individual men instead of toward the state itself. So he builds a professional standing army paid directly by Rome, rotates commanders so no general can build a personal power base, and secures the borders instead of endlessly expanding them. For a while, it works better than anyone could have hoped, but there's a border he never manages to close for good. The eastern edge of Germania, and the man who exploits that gap is someone Rome trained itself. Arminius grows up around Roman soldiers, serves in a Roman legion, earns the trust of a Roman general, and understands exactly how Roman formations move and think. When 3 full legions march into unfamiliar forest terrain, believing they're on a routine patrol, Arminius, their supposed ally, has already made sure they're walking into a trap of his own design. Over several days, more than 20,000 professional soldiers are lost in terrain no Roman commander had prepared for, and the border that had never been meant as permanent becomes permanent overnight. Rome never tries to hold that ground again. That betrayal from within pattern doesn't stop there. A private guard created to protect the emperor becomes so powerful that within a few generations, it is the one actually deciding who gets to rule. Emperors who displease it don't survive their reign. One of them is removed by his own guard and replaced on the spot, without any pretense of tradition or legitimacy. Later, in one of the empire's lowest moments, that same guard doesn't just remove an emperor. It puts the throne up for the highest bidder, as if the most powerful office in the ancient world were an auction item. By the time the empire finally splits permanently into an eastern and western half, and by the time the very last emperor in the west is quietly asked to step aside rather than removed in some dramatic final battle, the pattern has already written itself into every chapter that came before. It isn't outside invasion that breaks Rome first. The empire absorbs entire foreign nations for centuries, integrates them, and grows stronger from it. What breaks Rome, again and again, across founding kings, republican senators, celebrated emperors, and elite guards, is the exact same failure. The people closest to power deciding that removing the person on top is easier than trusting the system meant to hold everyone accountable. So the real question worth sitting with isn't which barbarian tribe finally ended Rome. It's this: if the empire's own founders, its own senators, and its own chosen protectors all eventually turned on whoever held power, was the collapse of Rome ever really about an enemy at the gate at all? Or had the empire already been quietly destroying itself from the inside since the very first brother crossed the very first wall? If this kind of hidden pattern in history is something you want more of, subscribe. There's a lot more buried in the archives we haven't uncovered yet.